All right. Welcome everyone to Build and Deploy 23. My name is Dan Garfield. I will be your host for today. For those of you that don't know me, I am the Chief Open Source Officer and co-founder of Codefresh. I am an Argo maintainer. I work quite a bit on that project. I am also a co-chair on the GitOps working group and helped create the GitOps open GitOps standard underneath the CNCF, which has been very fun. We have just an amazing program for you today because we have people coming from all over. We have some amazing speakers. We have some fantastic tech demos that have been put together. We have a lot of fun that's going to happen. And really, the whole day is about getting from point A to point B. It's about modernization. What we wanted to accomplish in today's Build and Deploy 23 event was helping you find ways to improve your software delivery processes so you can deploy more frequently with less downtime and fewer regressions, fewer failures. And we wanted to do this because there's so much to take advantage of right now in terms of technology to enable your teams to be effective. And it is going to maybe require some cultural changes. Maybe it's going to require adopting some new best practices. But one of the reasons that we decided to focus on modernization and getting from point A to point B, getting code that's been committed into the production and getting your team from where you're at today to where you want to be tomorrow, we wanted to focus on that because we've been leading this GitOps space, this CI/CD space for a while. We first launched our commercial Argo product over 3 years ago, and we first launched our CI/CD tooling almost 6 years ago now, over 6 years ago. And in that time, we've found that while we will often preach an ideal, and those of you that have seen my streams and follow me on Twitter and whatnot, know that I'm always preaching the best possible way of delivering software. But the real world is more complicated. It's more messy. People don't always have the tools they need. They don't always have the ability to adopt the processes that they want to adopt. Sometimes you're supporting legacy technologies. Sometimes there's different parts of the stack. Sometimes you have disagreements within the organization. And what you really need is flexibility to support you on your journey of improvement. And so today we're going to be putting the continuous improvement in continuous delivery. And first off, let me introduce our program for you. And please keep the chat active. You've got a QA button. If somebody's not in the room and they need to be in the room, get them in the room. Tell your team to join. We'd love to have them. So first off on our agenda, we are going to have essentially a roundtable keynote discussion between myself, Emily Freeman, Raziel, on CI/CD modernization. Then we're going to get into some lightning fast build and deploy patterns that you can use. This is the demo portion. There's not going to be a lot of slides. These are pretty much all the slides for the whole event. And then we have a surprise, very fun event that's going to be happening with some special guests from Sousa, Rancher, from Loft Labs, and from Launch Darkly. And then finally, we have some real world stories from some Codefresh users who have had some fantastic successes over this last couple of years that they're going to be sharing. So I think as we introduce this is a build and deploy exclusive. For those of you that are watching, if you haven't taken the GitOps certification, you can find it at learning.codefresh.io. We are going to be giving away 100% off free codes to get GitOps certified and trained with using Argo CD and using GitOps to deploy software. The code is just deployed. It's all lowercase. And there are a limited number of these codes. So you're going to want to rush out and go and claim it. Laurent just posted it in the chat. You can claim your free certification here. And it's a really fantastic certification that Kostis from our team created. He's amazing. I worked on it a little bit. Christian Hernandez worked on it. Hannah Seligson worked on it. So it's a fantastic certification. If you haven't done it, you should make sure to do it. And if you don't get this code, do not fret because you're going to want to stay for the end because we'll also have some free codes then. We'll have some additional surprises. So you're going to want to stick through the whole event because there's going to be some great stuff happening. So with all that said, grab a drink, get comfortable, tune in, and get ready for Build and Deploy 23. So our first session is going to be with some fantastic guests. You already know who I am. I've already introduced myself. I want to introduce Emily Freeman. Emily is a technologist and storyteller who helps engineering teams improve their velocity. As the author of DevOps for Dummies, she believes the biggest challenges facing developers aren't technical, but human. Her mission in life is to transform technology organizations by creating a company culture which is diverse and collaborative so that you can thrive. Emily is the head of community engagement and evangelism at AWS. Her experience spans cutting-edge startups and some of the largest technology providers in the world. Everyone, welcome Emily Freeman.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you could make it. You've got the internet running out there in Colorado. We were worried about you, but it's happening. And then the next man really needs almost no introduction. He is the CEO and founder, and I'm happy to say friend of mine, Raziel Tabib. He's an entrepreneur and technology enthusiast. He's really a software developer at heart. He's incredibly passionate and has led our company to success and has been just a wonderful leader in the software delivery space for a long time. So welcome, Raziel Tabib.
Thanks a lot, Dan. And nice to see you again, Emily.
All right. So for our topic today, which is really all about, and maybe I can just pause the sharing for a second because that's not really the focus. What we're going to be focusing on is improving software delivery. And so the first kind of topic for us to tackle is, what are the biggest challenges in CI/CD right now? I mean, CI/CD is an old term. It's been around for a while. What are the biggest challenges? And I want to go to you first, Emily. What are you seeing?
I think folks are trying to sort out the most efficient way of, evolving our CI/CD practices. And I think so much of the work y'all do around GitOps is really bringing these sort of DevOps best practices to that infrastructure automation and abstracting a lot of the more complex and honestly sometimes annoying aspects of software development and software delivery. So that's what I'm kind of seeing.
Yeah, and I think, Raziel, to add on this, we've talked a lot about how microservices are a big challenge. Is that where you're seeing the biggest challenge and what you're hearing from our customers and users out there?
I think, with CI/CD, it's interesting because I think, we always refer to it as CI/CD, but we often implement it as CI and somewhere else CD. Whether we're using the same platform or different platform. And when we implement it this way, I think this is like, to some level, keep apart these disciplines, keep apart this role and kind of limit our collaboration. And, we're not really taking the full potential of bringing both dev and ops together. So I think, again, we always refer to it. The challenge is how we bring this together, how we bring CI and CD together, how we bring dev and ops together, how we create this culture of both dev and ops working together. Because again, dev tend to look at CI all the time, what we built, what failed, and so on, but not necessarily knowing exactly what has been deployed, what is running now in production, what is running now in staging. And same for like ops, they know what's running, they know which image is running, but what actually does it mean? What code changes? What have we actually deployed? This is something that we often see. Again, we always look at CI/CD, but we're not yet there in bringing CI and CD together.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. I feel like that's a huge challenge that you're bringing up, where dev and ops are separated. And then to your point, Emily, people are stuck using old software, old processes, and they don't know how to get out of that rut. So one of the biggest shifts that's happened since, and it was really part of the reason that, Raziel, you had for starting Codefresh, and one of the reasons that, when you recruited me, I got really excited to come in and start this company with you, was that it felt like microservices were changing everything. So Raziel, I want to start with you. What's the impact of microservices on CI/CD?
Oh, geez. I think it's not just microservices, but first,
GitOps too. GitOps is the other part of the equation.
It's everything. I think, it started with microservices, but this was driving a big change in the technology. We're all moving it. Now Kubernetes containers really becoming the de facto, and it obviously has a lot of implication on CI/CD in terms of the numbers of pipelines, the volume of changes, and so on. So practices we've seen, you mentioned GitOps, but progressive delivery, there's so much change that we're trying to keep up to make it work because, with this exploding number of microservices, we just can't afford having, unmanageable number of pipelines. We're looking to see how we can have a unified pipeline that you can just plug in more microservices and it works. Otherwise, we just can't cope with these changes. Implementing, GitOps is really changed the landscape in such a way that we've realized that imperative deployment, like really just, pray and pray that everything will work, that doesn't work anymore. We have to keep on checking that our code deployment is working. So again, I think things have changed so much over the past 3 years that it looks like it was so long ago.
Yeah, and Emily, we had you come and speak at GitOpsCon. I think it was maybe 2 years ago in LA, and so you gave a great presentation about understanding the idea of desired state versus what's actually happening, actual state. Do you still see a lot of spray and pray out there in the community where they're using these imperative operations to do their deployments rather than GitOps? And why do you think they're, stalling?
I think imperative versus declarative is one aspect of this, but I think the real challenge ahead of us is we have gone from a relatively simple structure where you could more or less keep your architecture and application and infrastructure all sort of stored in your head, right? We understood what was happening and what was actually taking place. And then we kind of exploded this into this massive complex ecosystem, which has all these benefits, but the downside is we can no longer keep track of this. And we need our tools to help us keep track of it. And what Raziel was saying around, you may see what image is running, but what does that actually mean? What actually changed? And so having this visibility into those changes and keeping up with the ever quickening amount of changes is the tricky part.
Man, Emily, with the spoiler alert for what's happening later, that's absolutely what we're going to be showing off and talking about. Because I think that I actually saw recently on Twitter, people were saying, you know what, 2023, it's the year of the monolith. We're going to go back to the monolith. And I think I was laughing really hard because I think that the feeling that they're having is, gosh, I feel overwhelmed by how much is happening. I'm feeling overwhelmed by the number of pipelines, by the number of processes, by the number of different aspects. But I don't think there's really any way to go back, because the benefits of microservices from a scalability perspective, not only of the services, but of the teams themselves and the contributions, I don't think there's any going back, but maybe we'll see. And absolutely, we do have some Codefresh users that are doing some monolithic deployments too. So it does happen. Now, coming to the chat, I would say the biggest challenge that people say they're having is claiming that code that has already been used up. So they're going to have to stick around for another code later. But I think one of the challenges that we're talking about with this modernization is that people get stuck in a rut where they feel like, I'm just trying to keep the lights on. I'm just trying to keep the software running. I want to invest in improving my processes. I have 2,000 Jenkins pipelines I'm maintaining. I don't want to maintain these things anymore. How can I break out of that? How can I change my organization or change my day-to-day so that I actually can invest in modernizing my stack? And I know it's going to save me time down the road. I'm convinced, but how do I break out of that? And Emily, you've done a lot of work on culture, because maybe this is a cultural thing that needs to change.
I think it's in part cultural and in part tooling. I mean, everything with DevOps is this sort of inverted pyramid of people, process, and tools. I think what I've seen recently is we kind of swung the pendulum, and in tech, we love just swinging the pendulum all the way to the other side, where we have this very bespoke, very split apart aspect to our infrastructure, whereas every service team gets to build their own pipelines, their own process, and we kind of leaned into that for a number of years for reasons, right? We all make decisions the best we can with the information we have at the time. The downside of that now is we have these thousands of pipelines running, and there are different consequences to that. Not only is it harder to keep track of as an individual contributor, there are security and governance concerns, making sure that people maintain compliance. And there's also this sort of FinOps or budget concern around things. How do we actually keep track of all of this, and what is it actually costing us? So for me, the balance that I'm seeing a little bit is this pullback, this gentle pullback, right? We don't want to go back to this completely unified approach to pipelines, but really building a sort of platform where people can build on top of it and pull what they need, and then add the different elements that they need to be unique for their specific system or feature.
Raziel, please go ahead.
Yeah, like I cannot agree more. I think that building this platform is one thing, but I will add to that I think modern platform has to be more self-served by developers, self-served by these practitioners, because we don't want to have this bottleneck. So creating pipelines or modify pipelines is just something that, our DevOps, so our ops people can do. The more we kind of bring this platform and make them more self-serve, we kind of take away these bottlenecks and streamline kind of changes that can happen to the DevOps, not just to the code. And the other thing is that, we say, ROM has been built on one day. You don't have to kind of go and break everything into like microservices in one day. Usually like take parts, you see how that works, and then you start plugging more and more microservices as we go. So again, I think first thing is kind of really, again, breaking that separation between dev and ops, both culturally, but also, in tools, and make it like more self-serve. Once you get there, things will just be way, way, way smoother.
Yeah, what I've seen from our users is we'll have people who come on and they'll basically have kind of a lighthouse team that's like, hey, we're focused on modernizing and showing the way for everyone. And they'll come in and they'll start adopting these best practices. And once you set up, a shared pipeline that's building many different microservices, but there's only one pipeline to do it. And once you start doing GitOps, those teams, typically they see big successes fairly quickly with relatively low investment, and it shows people the way, and it opens up their mind to the possibility of what can be done. And then we see these other teams start to say, hey, I really like the way they're doing this. We've got the expertise internally. We know who to ask. We're going to start adopting this. And this is something else we've seen, users from the community who come to Codefresh who are saying, hey, you guys have done a lot of deployments using Argo. You've done a ton with Kubernetes. What should we do? How do we do this? Having that expertise, having that helping hand really does help people just move forward quicker. So this is excellent. I mean, we're going to have, I see the questions are already blowing up, which is awesome. We do need to come to a close here shortly. And so, Emily, I wanted to actually invite you to have the last word. We had a question from Thomas who said that he loved your intro. I think that's more a compliment for me than for you. But I think
well done, Dan.
But Thomas says, diversity of background and thought are incredibly powerful. I've recently seen a company not emphasizing it. Any ways to focus and emphasize it as an individual contributor? Any advice for Thomas?
Make room for diverse thought and diverse viewpoints, and take it one step further, right? We talk about ID and ED and I, however you want to actually kind of order them. But for me, so much of this isn't just the diversity aspect, but the inclusion aspect, where we actually listen to people of dissenting views, and the equity aspect, that we actually invite people who exist not only from diverse viewpoints, but who exist in different types of bodies, that we have that social diversity on top of that. That is what really starts to inject this different viewpoints, different ideas, different sort of pathways forward. And when you can really create a diverse team where everyone is safe to share their beliefs and their viewpoints, you can get some incredible ideas that you can execute on. So that would be my best advice. Make room.
Yeah, great advice. Well, thank you so much again, Emily, for joining. I know this is a relatively short, keynote discussion. Obviously, people can find you on Twitter. I think it's at Emily Freeman. Is that right?
At Editing Emily on Twitter. And then I'm moving over to Blue Sky, and I'm at Emily Freeman on Blue Sky.
Okay, excellent. So let's make sure we get those links posted. Thank you so much for joining, Emily, Raziel. We really appreciate you showing your leadership and sharing your thoughts. And now, as we go into the demo, we got to live up to all this talk that you've given us and these ideas you put in our heads.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks a lot, Dan, and thank you, Emily.
All right. So with Emily and Raziel signing off, thank you for the discussion in the chat. Keep that going. Shout out to Laurent and who else from our team is answering questions? Luke and Laurent are both answering questions. So keep those questions coming. And they're tagging stuff for us to talk about live. As we move into the demo portion, I think we're going to be able to actually show some of the answers to the questions that you even have right now. So keep those coming, keep them with you. Let's introduce Brandon Phillips. So Brandon is principal technologist at Codefresh and has an amazing background implementing pipelines and software delivery best practices. He was worked as a solutions architect for a long time at Codefresh. And so welcome, Brandon. And you're going to be helping us run through some demos, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I mean, the first thing I'll say is that panel, it gets me pumped because it's a lot of the same things, that I'm talking about with people all the time. And when we're talking on merging domain, we're talking about that. And it's just not as simple as you have an architecture, you have an implementation, and you have enforcement for DevOps, right? There's people problems, there's cultural issues, there's change that has to happen. So this demo, the set of demos really is to walk through some of those changes that ideally, over time you're going to go through as you kind of progress through the complexity within your organization.
Yeah, so we're gonna tell the people what they're gonna see. Before we show you that, we want to put a poll out there for what people are excited to learn about, what you're hoping to get out of this event, and maybe that'll help us tailor some of the feedback for you a little bit. So if you can take a moment and vote on the items. You can pick multiple ones that you're most excited to hear about. And Brandon, we've got a couple of demos. We called these 5 lightning fast build and deployment patterns. So we've got the first one is using just a Kubernetes deploy step as part of your CI/CD pipeline. This is a more traditional way of deploying software than the GitOps pattern, but it's one that a lot of people use. The second one is using Helm to deploy and using a Helm deploy step in Codefresh. The third one is using Argo sync steps with manual approval. So this is something that I see. I think, Brandon, you see this a ton when people are coming in to start adopting GitOps. They want manual approval steps.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is where we're going to stray a little away from what would be considered the true GitOps best practices. But it's okay. It's, there's a pragmatic way to implement and move over to things like GitOps or newer technology. And this is that step towards that. And so we'll kind of walk through what that looks like, why companies might do that. And then, from there, we'll show what happens when you go full. And now we're on Argo rollouts. We're doing auto sync. And then Dan's going to actually take us through bootstrapping some of this with Terraform. So it should be fun.
Using Terraform to make all of this happen. And so I think what you're getting is there's a stage that I'm at in my software delivery process, and I can see on this spectrum where I want to improve. That's what I'm hoping. So let's see the poll results. Can we close the poll?
Wow, it looks like we had great participation in the poll. So thank you, everyone. That's on. That's awesome.
Let's see. Oh, I'm not seeing the poll. Where is it? Where are the poll results?
There they are.
Okay. So it looks like CI/CD pipelines very heavy, deployment strategy, development best practices, still want a lot of Argo, still a lot of developer experience. So pretty split. People want to see basically all the stuff we're going to show. So Brandon, I think you're going to share your screen and start walking us through some of these demos.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're doing it live. So this should be fun. So let me go ahead and share. One moment here. All right. And so we're kind of landing on our home dashboard here, but it's important to understand that, this is encompassing of all of your deployment types. But we're going to start by looking at the Kubernetes deployment using just a straight, Kubernetes deployment step, deploying a service out there. So we'll drop into our projects here, and we'll go into what Dan affectionately named DevOps 2020 here. And let's drop in. And you know what? We're going to start in the workflow view. So for those of you already in the Kubernetes world, in the Argo world, you're very familiar with YAML, I'm sure. Codefresh is a YAML pipeline-based process, but it is a simplified YAML format. So we really make it easy to utilize. We support a lot of great features like YAML anchoring and things like that to help you build and generate, pipelines that can stay dry. You're not repeating yourself. You're not creating unnecessary work here. And it is a Kubernetes native container-based CI platform. So hugely helpful when you're working with Kubernetes to have something that is also container native. Each one of these steps here is actually a container process in its own right, which means you can run and execute containers. You can build steps very easily that utilize containers under the scenes, making it very, very flexible for that. You'll notice a couple of things as we're going through. So for example, here in this clone step that we're referencing a repo, you'll notice that we're actually missing the authentication here. And that's because things like this, like your clusters, your integrations with your Git, your cloud storage buckets, that kind of stuff, they get set up as native integrations and they're very easy to reference from a pipeline. You don't need to have that authentication baked into this process. So that makes that a lot easier.
Yeah, they essentially act as objects within Codefresh. Once created, they can be shared and controlled as an object.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the benefit of it being object is obviously it's natively available inside of the pipeline process, but we get a little bit more capabilities than you would otherwise, unless you're going to write like a bunch of custom code here. And if we scroll down a little bit, you'll see that we're actually building 3 services at the same time. So this is part of an area that we've really focused on, was making, parallelism inside of a pipeline process very easy to execute. And one of the complexities for, those of you who have done this manually outside is you're like, okay, well, I'm going to build these services. How do I share a volume between? How do I make sure I'm taking advantage of cache layers? How do I get the most performance out of this? So that's something that Codefresh is doing automatically, because we are building this in a Kubernetes platform. We're building this in a container native way. We actually can mount a shared volume to the backend and seamlessly transition that between any of the steps that you execute. And we also bake basically our own, caching layer behind that. So you have your standard stuff like Docker layers, image caching, that kind of stuff. But we have our own algorithm to store and maintain cache for things like, let's say, your NPM or, your Artifactory repository that you're going to hit constantly. We can intelligently maintain that to make sure that your deployments stay fast, right? And they just get faster and faster.
And ultimately, that means your pipelines run faster with less configuration. That's what it means at the end of the day. And I've seen people implement very complex caching mechanisms with tools like Jenkins, and they're tricky to get right. And there's also security issues that you need to be aware of. And so Codefresh having this baked in, huge value. I don't have to configure it. I'm just going to get it for free.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of times when people come to us, they're using other platforms. That's the first thing they notice. They're like, oh, well, like after like the 3rd build, this is like 4 times as fast as it was, or 10 times as fast as it was in the previous platform. And that's huge.
Yeah, we have
and
some case studies on this. We have some case studies on the site. Maybe Sharon can post them in the chat, but where people saw huge performance improvements because of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this build process itself, relatively straightforward. We have, a Go build here, which we're going to play around with a little bit, building the actual images out. We're enriching them with some, information that, basically allows us to get more traceability into the image process. We're going to run through some tests and upload them. And then we actually will deploy these out. Now, right now, we are missing one of the services here. So I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm just going to do this so we can see a UI here. And so now this one is going to be UI.
While he's typing that in, he could have grabbed it from the steps to the side and brought it in. But in this case, there's just a few values to update to get this to deploy. And the way that this deploy step works is here he's referencing a service. And the step is basically going to find out which pods are associated with that service. You could also do a deployment. You could target a deployment instead. And this is going to be the equivalent of a kubectl patch command running. So this allows us to build an image and then immediately patch it into a Kubernetes. So this is a great pattern for folks that are doing like dev testing, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to Dan's point, I could have gone over here. I could grab, if I can type, I can grab the deploy step, and then I can actually use the deploy steps to do a release here. Since we had easy access to it, I just copy pasted it. Let's go ahead and run this, but you're going to notice something very interesting here, which is when I go to execute this, as soon as it loads as a branch in, I can actually choose to debug it. So this is a very powerful feature.
Brandon, can I ask you a question? Is your YAML indented properly? Because I'm looking at that title and it looks like it's double indented.
It might be. It run.
Okay.
Let's see what happens. Okay, so we're kicking this off. Now you'll notice here that there is actually a breakpoint on here. So I can go in and I can specify breakpoints as I want to add a breakpoint before, override, after. This gives me the capability to actually drop into a command line. And on that command line, I can interact with the shared volume that's transitioned between steps. I can interact with the container itself. I can override commands. So if I need to test something. And the really cool thing is it's not just limited to running a pipeline and debug. I can find an actively running container and I can actually drop in as well. So this is essential when you're creating pipelines. It's essential if you're running pipelines in production and you suddenly have an issue. It gives you that easy capability to drop in and figure it out where you just don't really have that in other platforms. And so here, for example, this is actually a Go builder step where we're spinning up a Go Alpine container, which is what you would need to build. Now, if I take a look, I actually have the application because we've done our clone step here, and I can take a look and the application code has been ported in. But if I do a Go version, it's going to say Go command not found because I'm actually debugging before we spin up that container. So let's go ahead and continue. And let's actually spin up this container process. And so now we can see it spins up. Let's do the same thing again. So now you can see when I execute that command, I'm actually in the Go container. The Go build capabilities are there. And if I wanted to, I could override this command. So really good for being able to test this out. So we're going to continue that. Yeah, go ahead,
I was just
Dan.
going to say, I find that debugging with breakpoints, which is a Codefresh exclusive that that doesn't exist on any other platform. You can't set breakpoints in a pipeline and operate it. It helps me build pipelines way faster. As we were building these demos, I think we both at some point said, oh, wait, hey, hang on. What's that variable? What did that move? How did that happen? Being able to drop right in with the debug step and then inspect that stuff and execute it and figure out what's going on in context. And you're moving in and out of different containers. So you have totally different tooling available.
Oh, definitely.
Very cool.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's just critical to be able to drop in and actually see what's going on in the volume. I think we all know that more than once you think the structure in a Docker container is a little bit different than it actually is, and trying to troubleshoot that is tedious. And if I go to a completed build here, you can actually see it's very easy to link out to things like test reports. And here I can actually drill in and say, oh, in the test, I can take a look. So it gives, your developers, your platform team easy access to be able to visualize some of this. Now, the other cool aspect is because Codefresh itself has the capability to integrate natively with your Kubernetes clusters, I can go to Kubernetes services here. I can look at the cluster context that we have, which was Aperture Prod. That's what we deployed to. And I can very easily go into that namespace and I can see that the service has been deployed out there. And even the endpoint link itself, right? So I could click through to the running application. So this, of course, can be locked down if you would prefer, but this gives you that flexibility to give your developers a place to go look. Even if they're just doing a regular Kubernetes deployment, they can go look and see what's actively running here. And of course, you get other enrichment information like, the status, the health of it. I could actually, and this is very handy for developers that maybe aren't as comfortable with Kubernetes. We give you helpful commands to go in and take a look at the pods. And although I don't necessarily recommend it, if you have developers in sandbox environments, they can actually go in and edit the resources and change the amount of memory, CPU limits, that kind of stuff. Very useful feature and very helpful to maybe a development group that's new to Kubernetes.
That's something that we didn't touch on is that this view is actually available for Kubernetes clusters that are behind the firewall as well, because we have essentially an agent you can deploy. So no matter where someone was asking in the chat earlier, can I fully hosted code? Can I run Codefresh fully hosted? You totally can. That's an option, but hybrid, we host the control plane and you have these agents that you deploy where you need them. And they are all egress only. They don't allow any outside connections to come in. They just report the information back into these dashboards. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, that's obviously critically helpful. Especially, we tend to work with a lot of folks that have like external customers or they have multiple regions that they want to isolate this stuff out, but they still want the ability to have a centralized control plane over that. And that's what it gives them. So it's, hugely beneficial to that.
So now we've shown people a simple Kubernetes build and deploy. And in that case, we were building 3 services and deploying them together. That's sort of a bespoke pipeline, but we could also be a lot more general. And now let's go over to Helm, because Helm is very popular and packaging and deploying Helm charts is more complex than just doing a Kubernetes deployment. So we have a lot of interesting tooling here.
Yeah, absolutely. So Helm here, my goal is to show you the simplest pipeline possible. So there could be a bunch of other stuff that you do in a Helm pipeline, right? You could be, updating the Helm chart, pushing it to a Helm repo, all of this other stuff. And by the way, Codefresh actually, as part of our platform, has a Helm repo built in that you can use. But in this case, we're going to do a really simple Helm deploy this so that we can actually play around with some of the other tools here. And I'll actually use this deploy step builder here. So this is really cool. If I drop in here, I can actually utilize some of the examples to do this. What I can also do, and again, really handy for people that aren't super comfortable, is I can drop over and I can actually use the step builder itself. And so I can start to enter in the values that I want. Barely need this to fail fast. This is going to be part of my deploy stage. I can start to populate in the values here, and hopefully I don't end up having any typos. Let's see. For our chart name, we're actually going to look at base. And so let's take a real quick look at that. So we're actually going to reference, oh, okay. Well, we're not going to look at that. Here, we'll do remind me later and see if it works. So we're going to take a look at this, which is the DevOps repos. This is actually where the manifests live for Helm. So this is what we really care about in this case. So if I drop in and I go to manifests and our Trio app, which is what we're going to deploy, I have my base. But in addition to the base, which is outlining all the core services that are going to get deployed, I also have my values files for each environment. So that's what I'm going to overlay. And in this case, it's going to be a very simple example where I'm hard coding that value. But you may also want to have that variabilized so that depending on the trigger event or however you're running this process, that it would actually overlay values. So let's go through here. Release name is going to be Trio app, namespace, and we'll just go into Helm dev. We don't have anything in there right now. Not worried about chart version. And we'll do this. And then I'm going to put a placeholder here. All right. And so what that's doing is I'm saying I'm going to reference an actual custom values file, and I will end up copying. So let's here. And so now I've got this step in here, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. And I'm going to copy in this, which is the location of the actual values file in that repo that we looked at. And then I'm also going to cheat a little bit more. And there's something that I like to do to make this a little bit easier, which is in Codefresh, you can set your working directory for a step. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set my working directory for this step so that it knows to pull the base for the chart from this location. And then that persists through that step. So very helpful to do it this way. And then we'll just go ahead and we'll save and we'll run this guy. And hopefully it's going to work. Hopefully.
I have high hopes. I have high faith in you, Brandon.
Yeah. So like I said, world's simplest pipeline, but just to kind of demonstrate the Helm stuff. And while that's spinning up, I'm going to go take a look at another area where we can actually start to see this a little bit. So if we go into our Helm releases tab, in our Helm releases, this gives you easy access to see what's actually deploying out into your clusters. So for example, that one that we did earlier, the Trio app, you can see that's deployed in the CI/CD namespace. So we can see that chart instance out there. The one that we're actively deploying right now, we can see in Helm dev here. And if I drop into any of these, I get more information about it. The other thing would be if you wanted to integrate in, say, a Helm chart repo directly to this, or you want to use a Codefresh Helm chart repo, you'll actually see these here. And for people that aren't as familiar, or you want them to have flexibility for sandbox environments, they can easily install directly from the Helm chart here. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this. Oh, it actually finished. So
oh yeah, it looks like it worked.
Okay, perfect. So I didn't have any typos. So let's go back to our Helm boards here, and we're actually going to build out a Helm board. Call this one Trio app. And we got to add in an environment. So we started with dev. Again, this is our cluster that we're deploying to is Aperture Prod. And then it's going to auto-populate this. You can also type, of course. We'll do Helm dev. And then we're going to start with blue. And I'm going to talk about the pipeline thing here in just a second. But if I do that, the minute that I do that, you can see that it loads in the services. It already knows that it's here. You can see it's deploying the replicas right now for that. That's great. Perfect. Let's go ahead and add in staging. And we will use, let's do purple. I like purple. And now you'll see there's no releases in staging right now, right? So we have a release in dev. What you can do, and this is really helpful for people that aren't as familiar, or maybe you have data scientists that you work with, is you can actually drag and drop this deployment. Now, there's a few things to talk about here. You can use a default pipeline, and Codefresh will actually handle the promotion for you. That's totally an acceptable solution. You can select the revision, all of that stuff. The other thing that we see done quite frequently, and I would consider more of a best practice, you can actually use custom pipelines for initial deployment and custom pipelines for promotion processes, where then you can control things a little bit more as part of this process.
Now, obviously, it's going to need to do something like a Helm install. I mean, that's what the default pipeline is essentially. It's doing an upgrade install probably. For the customization, what are some of the benefits that people are going to get if they customize it? If they want to add in maybe approvals or security checks, other kinds of things?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's the stuff that you're saying, but also they might want to smoke test, right? Have QA actively look at it, or they might run a test suite like Test Complete that's going to do automated testing. And then there's some sign-off process as part of that. So there's a lot of different things. The other thing would be you can overlay values here. Like, so if I wanted to overlay shared configuration or Helm chart values, I can do that here, but you get a little bit more control inside the pipeline on what key value pairs you actually want to overlay. So we're just going to go ahead. We'll hit promote here. This is going to kick off a pipeline all on its own where it's going to go through and execute this. So fun stuff. So as it promotes this, we should see it start to show up in our Helm release boards and our Helm releases. So very cool stuff there. As far as the Helm support goes, now, of course, if we start to move into the Argo world, which we will, Helm is still fully utilized there as well. And if I go to the Kubernetes services and I take a look at our Helm dev, it's the same thing, right? So even though I deployed with the Helm chart, I still have visibility into what's actually running inside of this cluster. So it's having that end-to-end chain of saying, okay, for Helm, I know, the pipeline can manage it, do the deployment. I can manage it in a board if I want to. I can see it from the Kubernetes services here. And this is going to go through and it's going to promote the process. And so that one has now completed. So let's go back here for Helm releases. Let's just, I think the refresh interval is like 3 or 4 minutes by default, but we're going to force it to do a refresh here. And then it's going to pick up that it's actually running in the Helm board process. So we can see now, oh, we've actually had a promotion that moved to Helm staging. So let's go into here, and we can now see that our promotion has made its way into Helm staging. So very powerful way to utilize Helm and keep it simple, make sure that people can easily utilize it without overwhelming them. So really, really helpful stuff. Let's go ahead and jump into Argo pipeline with manual sync. Any teaser words here, Dan?
Just a word, parting word on Helm. This kind of drag and drop interface, it's really powerful for teams that are especially newer to Kubernetes. They don't understand YAML necessarily, but you can have this process. It's very simple and self-serve. And this is what Raziel and Emily were talking about when we kicked off this event. It's about bridging the gap between dev and ops and giving people the tools they need. This is a place where dev and ops come together to see what's going on, work with Helm, promote charts, and have very good clarity about what's happening in all their environments. It's visibility that I've never seen in any other platform that gives this level of visibility into Helm.
Yeah, it's bridging that gap, right? And it's finding out, okay, what is the right amount of complexity that I want to share with developers? Because a lot of times they don't know that much about Kubernetes, or it's not their core focus. So let's find that right level.
And I'm curious, like for people that are joining, I wonder how many of you are looking and you're saying, okay, I'm at level 1, the Kubernetes deployment. Now, this Helm deployment, this is an opportunity for me. Or maybe some of you are deploying to Helm, and now as we move into the Argo with manual steps, this is another evolution that provides some additional benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear that as well. I mean, by the way, we work with people all across the spectrum. And to be honest, most companies have greenfield applications that are maybe using the newest stuff. They have some that have been converted. They have some that's still on legacy, and they're kind of all over the board. And it's this continual modernization. As Dan said, we're pushing towards continuous improvement. And this is just giving you the flexibility to utilize what makes sense, for that particular application. Mm-hmm. So here we're going to jump into, okay, I want to do GitOps. I'm ready to do GitOps. I believe in it. It's the right thing for me. Like, we've had problems that I feel like GitOps is going to help us with. We can't go all in on GitOps. And we hear that all the time, right? Just from people who are like, we love GitOps. We already started using it, but like, we have to have that practical amount of, security or approval process, or gated by change management. How do I actually integrate that in? So if I take a look here, for example, this pipeline, we're just going to start from the build view. Not really that complicated considering we're going from QA to staging to prod. But what I'm doing inside of here is, I'm cloning down the repository for QA. I'm updating the manifest. We commit it back. Now we have manual sync turned on in Argo in this case. So again, maybe not, 100% the GitOps best practices, but this is the practical approach. But here, what I'm doing is I have sync Argo CD. So I'm actively calling to Argo, and Argo is going to handle that deployment process. Now that's great. So our QA environment's out there. But I know I want to promote this up to staging as well. We're trying to get, as far as we can towards continuous deployment without actively being able to do that yet. So I can layer in things like a pending approval process here. And in that pending approval process, I can then set it up so that someone has to approve it. They can approve it via Slack or Teams. They'll get a message in there. They can approve it right inside of the platform itself. But basically, they have the capability to go in here and approve it before it gets deployed out to another environment. Now,
someone asked, what about if I use ServiceNow? Does this integrate? And the answer is yes, you can integrate it. And it works with single sign-on and RBAC. You can set up your permissions and assign a team, whatever.
Absolutely. And we see people use that a lot, that approach with ServiceNow. We also see it with Jira, where they'll have a step that actively goes out and checks for the status of a task. If it's good, it'll start moving through the deployment. We've also seen it the other way, which is Codefresh has a CLI and an API, which gives you all the features you see in the UI here. And they might have an enterprise scheduling software that actually is part of the change management process. And when they get an approval, it will then make the request via the API to approve the deployment to staging. So it can work in all sorts of different directions. And again, it's just about having a platform that has that flexibility to do that. You can start to really instill the benefits of GitOps, of declarative configuration on the back end, of all of the natural benefits of having something that's doing continuous reconciliation between your environments without having to totally say, we're going to do continuous deployment, we're going automated into production.
And someone asked earlier, hey, what would you recommend for managing deployments between environments where you need approvals and maybe multiple services? This is a great pattern. And here we're showing it with the Trio app, here we're showing it with the Color app, which is one service, but it could be orchestrating multiple services and it wouldn't really look different. And the pipeline could be generic. So you could have it managing many environments, and it's just a matter of which changes are triggering the pipeline that passes in the variables that you need so the pipeline knows how to operate.
Absolutely. And I think most of our customers are using it in a generic fashion. And I'll kind of talk a little bit about the flexibility with that with triggers and in the next section. Just to show you real quick about the pipeline here, to show you how simple it actually is. So it's very similar to stuff that we've already looked at. We have enrichment, we have our build process, we're cloning in an environment. Here, we're actually using YQ to update a manifest. We have a step that can do that as well, and we're committing it back. This is the sync call to Argo. So this is very simple to do. And one of the most common patterns that I see from our customers, especially when they're like, we want to do canary deployments. Like, we're excited about it. Like, it's going to be great for our teams, but we're like not quite ready to go full in automated canary. They'll actually do a sync that kicks off the canary rollout process. It gets to a certain weight, let's say like 20 or 30 or 50%. And then QA actually goes out there, they smoke test it, they run some test automation, and then they approve it so that it can move on to the next step and continue the sync process. So then you would just see another sync call to Argo to say, okay, we're good with that. Let's go ahead and hit the next step. And Argo is going to continue with that rollout process. So very flexible in that regard. And I think overall, this pattern is, I just think it's a great, stepping stone to jump into GitOps. It gives you really all the flexibility you need. And it's also going to make, managers and like product owners and the DevOps leads a little bit more comfortable that you're not moving as quick, not breaking as many things.
Yeah, there's a question here. When it comes to this, here we're actually making commits, right? And someone is saying, well, how do you handle this with protected branches and pull requests that require specific approvals? And I think it's just all about the configuration that you choose and having a user that can commit. And if you need to push and then open a PR, that's totally an option too. We actually have a step here that is a pull request creator. So you can create the pull request right here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that quite frequently where what it's doing is it's actually creating a pull request, and that pull request is actually gated by, let's say, a security person and a QA person who has to validate it, and they have to go do whatever their testing is to approve it. Or in this case, it could be an architect. And then our triggers actually allow you to then say when that PR is merged, kick off this process, and it automatically gets the commit information to do this. So very possible to go with that approach. So let's talk about when we have auto sync turned on. And again, what we're going to see here as far as the traceability goes is not exclusive to having Argo, auto sync with Codefresh. This is really any process inside of Codefresh that's utilizing GitOps. We can get this traceability. But for this application, go ahead.
Maybe Brandon, just a word on these instances. If you're using Argo CD, this view is going to look very familiar to you.
Yeah.
Because each one of these tiles represents an application. For those of you that are new to this, who haven't seen this before, each of these applications represents essentially a configuration that says, here's the source of truth for the configuration. Here's where the YAML lives. Here's the destination for where it should be. And here's some policies for how those things should be reconciled. Should it be, if something gets changed in production, should it automatically be corrected? If something gets deleted in Git, should it automatically be deleted? So we have a few options there. But if you are familiar with Argo, this is going to look very familiar, but you're going to notice that we have a lot of enterprise features that we've added on top of Argo.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the first thing being that, it's a centralized control plane for any number of Argo runtimes that you have, right? So that's hugely beneficial if you have external runtimes. It's one UI for your developers, your platform team to go to, because a lot of times you're at least going to want to separate your lower environments from your upper environments, just for separation of responsibilities. You're going to need one place for developers to go to understand the state. So let's go down and take a look at one of our deployments here. So we'll look at Trio app, and we've been, kind of seeing Trio up here the whole time, but this is part of the fully automated deployment. And we'll click into this guy here. And this is a view you're going to be familiar with, right? It looks a lot like what you see in Argo CD as far as the current state goes. We have enriched it quite a bit more. You get a bit more depth on some of the resources that are utilized, as well as the sync history here. But it's still going to be a familiar view. Right.
You could go to the pods and examine logs, and all this depends on permissions, of course, based on my user. And this is something that we've kind of touched on, but when you set up your SSO in Codefresh and you set up your permissions, you can actually have that inherited across all instances. We actually have, today, we're working with, I think, 6 or 7 different Argo CD instances in this demo. And they're all managed in that single view, single pane of glass. So as a developer and operations person, I don't really have to care which instance I'm using, because I'm able to just connect and move in and out of these instances without really being aware of them. I'm just working on the application.
Yeah, absolutely. So it just makes it a seamless experience, which if I'm a developer and something is a pain, I'm sorry, I'm just going to avoid it for the most part. You want it to be as seamless as possible for them to view and understand what's happening with their deployments, and the same for the DevOps team as well. So this view, obviously great. It is a powerful view to be able to see the current state. I also really like the services view. I'm a little biased on this one, but I like this really simple breakdown of exactly what services are actually deployed as part of this. What are the labels and versions and images that are tagged with this? Really helpful. And then where the real magic happens is when we start to take a look at the timeline. So the timeline is really cool. Obviously, you have a history of all of the events that have happened with this application, and you can drill down. And one of the things that I really like here is as I add filters, they are appended to the URL, so you can easily save bookmarks, if that's relevant to your team. But you'll notice that I have a list of the pull requests. I have a list of issues, and this can be your project management issues. And the really cool thing here is, a lot of teams struggle with actually generating a release manifest. Well, if you associate your project management tasks with this deployment, you have a built-in release manifest right here. You no longer have to create a manual process to pull all this together. And the other cool thing is if I go in and I see that my deployment made it to staging, but it's not in production, I can check to see, oh yeah, that Jira task is still not complete, right? In this case, it's in to-do, but it's not in a complete state. And then the other thing is if I take a look over here, I'll see that I have the CI build associated with this deployment. I have the full list of commits. Now you may think, oh, well, okay, well, you have the commits, but it's a big deal because in GitOps, you only see the most recent commit.
Can
go ahead,
actually, Brandon, on this, would you click on the SHA that's on that healthy line that says current version? If you're just using Argo CD or using another GitOps tool, when you look at a change in a manifest, 99% of the time, it's just showing you that an image was updated, because you're not usually changing the manifest more than that. But what Codefresh does, and if we go back to the other screen, is it examines all the images that were updated. So actually, why don't we look at the deployment that was even below this?
Yeah, absolutely.
If we expand that one out, or let's do the one below that maybe. Yeah, okay. So for example, this one, there were 2 images that were updated as part of this release. And it looks at those images and it says, oh, okay, here are the Jira issues. Here are the commits. Here are the pull requests associated with those images that are being updated. So you're getting that developer experience in the ops platform. So the developers are here and they can see their stuff has been deployed. And they would see it on the Jira ticket at this point, or they'd see it on the pull request. But it's also, from an ops perspective, if I'm trying to figure out what's going wrong, I can jump immediately and say, oh, this is what was being worked on. This is who was working on it. I could see how that would be causing an issue. I can do a rollback if I need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's just having that flexibility to view this all in one place and understand the entire provenance of the image, the build process, everything related to it. And another thing I should point out here too is, so in Argo, if you're doing a rollout with a canary or a blue-green deployment, you want to have good visibility into that. And so for these, for example, I can see that we're at 3 instances have actually been deployed. If I had an active progressing deployment, I would see it in here. And if I drill in, I can see the status, the steps of this. So right now, this is a simple canary, 20% with a pause, 50% with a pause for demonstration purposes. But you can layer in analysis steps in here. You can have analysis against, Datadog or Prometheus metrics. It'll all show up inside of here, so you have one centralized location to do it. The other thing that I want to mention is you can roll back. Now, in this case, we have autosync turned on. So you'll notice that rollback is actually not allowed with autosync enabled. But if you don't have autosync enabled, you have an easy capability to roll back directly from within this UI. Now, this can be locked down, of course, based on permissions, but it's just something to keep in mind that you have all that flexibility. Now, the timeline view, obviously very cool on its own, but I can actually drop into the image, which as a developer, this is actually what gets me excited. So if I click into this image here, now what I'm doing is I'm actively looking at an image that's been deployed out. And maybe let's go take a look at this one down here. Okay, so same kind of idea, but I can actively see that this application is deployed in staging right now. And if it's in multiple environments, you'll actually see the multiple environments here. I have information like the full, basically commit stack here. And the interesting thing is, so we were looking at that single commit before, didn't give us a lot of information. Here, I can click through to the actual merged PR, get the full information about that commit stack and really an understanding of what's actually running out there.
And if you had clicked on the commit from the app dashboard, you would have gotten to the same place as well. So it's taking you directly to the app changes. Yeah,
exactly. And of course, all the information we've already talked about. You have your pull requests, you have your issues in here. You have the ability to annotate the image itself so you can see test results, all sorts of cool stuff like that. And I can still trace back to the workflow too. So this can take me directly back to the actual pipeline that deployed it. Immensely beneficial to be able to do this, right? To know the entire chain of the history of this application. So let's take a look at the pipeline real quick. We're not going to go deep in this because I think we're already over time, but we'll talk about it for just a moment. What, Dan?
I said we're doing great.
Yeah. So let's just talk about a few things because we have this pipeline. This looks similar to the pipelines that we've already showed already. But I do want to mention one thing. So we talked about having sort of a unified pipeline structure that can be shared across microservices and how, on the panel discussion, we were talking about how you can end up with sprawl of pipelines and it can be really challenging to maintain those. So if I go over to our triggers here, inside the triggers, you'll notice that I have 5 triggers for the single pipeline. And there's no limit to the number of triggers that you can actually have on here. So for example, I could have 100 triggers all executing this pipeline information here. And it gives me the flexibility to layer in things like if I go in to add trigger, I can have Git, cron, registry, Helm-based triggers. Let's just go through with Git. And here, this can come from any repo. It doesn't have to be a specific repo. It doesn't have to be out of a mono repo. Any repo that you have configured to link up, basically. And I get options to do things like look for regex expression. I can specifically import shared configuration. So this could, we could import key value pairs. We could bring in values from Vault. So just an immense amount of flexibility.
And everything about this pipeline is generic. So if I needed to onboard an additional 500 applications, I can do that just by creating additional triggers, which is a lot easier than creating additional pipelines. So this is what we were talking about when we were saying, I'm going to create one pipeline to manage many services. And this is the challenges that Emily and Raziel were talking about with microservices. Typically, if you have 1,000 applications, you create 1,000 repositories and 1,000 pipelines for them. That's a lot of overhead to manage. Whereas in Codefresh, hey, I can just manage it all with a single pipeline.
Yeah, and the problem that we have is like you end up with basically changes in, 3 of those pipelines, and then 11 of those pipelines, and then 13 of those pipelines. And you no longer have a standardized process. So if you're trying to build out standardization, you're trying to set guardrails that make sense, this is just a great way to do it. And one last thing to touch on here too, you'll notice, inside of here, we have a lot of variables that are inherent to Codefresh. They're coming from the trigger event. They're coming from the volume. But we also have the capability to bring in variables as well. So we can add them into shared configuration. We can manually have variables, and then the variables that we already talked about on the triggers. Or if you need to, you can, of course, pull them in from things like HashiCorp Vault or AWS Secrets Manager and inject those values.
Yeah.
So really, this was just a quick run through of 4 patterns that really help you get that visibility from top to bottom, making sure that, you can find the right level that your developers are comfortable with, that your DevOps team is comfortable with, so that you can make the transition in a timeframe that makes sense for your org, basically. And now this was all of the practical pipeline side, but I think we should also talk about bootstrapping. And you want to take that away, Dan?
Yeah, so let's talk about Terraform for a minute. So there have been some questions where people have said, hey, this is great. What if I want to do deployments using Terraform? What if I want to deploy to VMs or serverless? Those are all things that are supported within Codefresh. We have a few different ways of handling those things. And I'm going to come back into the Terraform, how you deploy using Terraform. But something that I would like to show you is that we actually have the ability to create all of this using Terraform. So Codefresh, let me fix my scare. So Codefresh actually has a Terraform provider. So if you wanted to create pipelines, triggers, add clusters, all these different contexts, you can actually use this provider to do it. And you can bootstrap your entire organization with all your pipelines and triggers, et cetera. And having a declarative way of managing all those triggers and things, obviously very powerful tool. So I'm going to show you just briefly. Here's a simple example pipeline. Costas recently did a blog post on this, on using this Terraform provider. Maybe somebody can post that in the chat. If I go and look at this workflow, this one's going to be very simple. We're going to check out our repo, and we're going to do a Terraform apply. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to use the Terraform image, and we're going to do a Terraform init. Now, Terraform backends are really important. Managing those backends are very important, I should say, because they essentially keep track of the state of your system. There are a couple of ways of doing this with Codefresh, I'm going to show you. But before I do that, let me just show you around the Terraform provider here. So if I look at my variables, you can see that I'm specifying where Codefresh is. So if I was self-hosting Codefresh, I could pass this as a variable and point it at my instance. You can see I need to access a token. I need a GitHub token. And I can create my specific application in here. And then in the provider itself, when I provision, for example, a pipeline, here I'm creating a new Codefresh project called example project. And then I am generating a new pipeline that's going to use this YAML that's currently checked into Git. And then I can also generate my trigger. And that trigger is going to use the Git integration that is going to be bootstrapped as part of that setup process with the variables. Now, to apply this stuff, coming back to the state management, here when I do a Terraform init, remember way back earlier when Brandon was saying that there's a shared volume and a cache volume that's automatically associated with these? Well, here the Terraform init is actually going to be relying on the back end that is sitting in the local file system. So it's automatically going to be managed by the Codefresh volume. So you don't have to do anything. That volume is just going to be managed for you right there. Another way of doing this, and for this one, I'm going to switch accounts. So multi-tenancy is pretty important, and I can manage permissions and scopes and things by switching accounts. I'm going to go back to the Aperture Science account that Brandon was just showing you. And here I'm going to show you a different pipeline. Again, a Terraform operator here that we've got. And this one is set up to do a preview. So it's gonna generate a plan and output it. Now, this one is managing the backend a little bit differently. In this one, the backend is actually being pulled from a Kubernetes cluster. So remember when I mentioned earlier that, that my Kubernetes cluster is actually an object. Well, here I'm actually able to just associate the kube config and drop it into the next step. And so I'm actually using etcd as the backend storage for Terraform. In addition to that, I could actually use a storage bucket. So if I jump over to my account settings here and I look at my pipeline integrations, you can see I've got these Kubernetes clusters, which Brandon was using and deploying to. So I've got my kubectl dev, I've got my Aperture prod. These are both available as objects that I can reference for my pipelines. I also have the ability to do storage buckets. So this is for larger backends. You could actually configure cloud storage and S3 bucket, whatever it is, and use that as a backend. And again, all the permissions are going to be applied. Just to show you the permission side of it, I can actually create RBAC, role-based access control, for these different resources. And I can do the same thing with pipelines. So not only users, but I can limit which pipelines have access to which resources. This is possible today with Kubernetes clusters. So I can have Kubernetes clusters with different Terraform backends that are accessible by different pipelines, but not by necessarily anybody else. And we also have the feature coming to manage storage buckets in the same way very soon. So this gives you an idea of how you could use Terraform with Codefresh to using it in your pipelines. This is a very popular pattern that we see a lot of our users using Terraform. And of course, if you were using some of those next-gen tools like Crossplane, vCluster, Cluster API, all of those you could use to deploy serverless as well, and they would show up as applications inside of that GitOps dashboard. So we've shown quite a bit, Brandon. There's a lot here, and hopefully people's brains aren't melting at this point. So why don't we just take a second and check in for questions? And Brandon, would you mind? I think there are a couple of questions tags. Could you answer a couple of questions for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take a look here. So serverless is containerized more often than not, just checking other functions. Yeah, absolutely. So Codefresh does support serverless. So we have built-in steps to actually do that. And obviously you have the flexibility to execute it however you want. Some people will pull down the AWS SDK image and utilize that to execute. It's really up to however you want to handle that process. And it also depends on what your existing process looks like today. Let's take a look here. Can you restrict marketplace apps to a specific set? Yeah, so you can have, so typically the way that that's managed is sort of an account of accounts approaches. So you can have a hierarchy of accounts and you can separate out the step marketplaces. It's also important to mention that within that step marketplace, you have obviously the public step marketplace, but you have your own private step marketplace where you can put it, any steps that you create, custom steps you can create. And the documentation to create that is very simple. It's actually on our basically our docs page, and you can take a look at it. It's very straightforward to do. Take a look. Using Terraform is nice for setting up a pipeline for new service. Yeah, but it could be cumbersome for developers. Agreed. Yeah. Is it possible to create a new pipeline with a trigger on a repo change via git commit push? Yeah, absolutely. We actually do that internally for some of our stuff, as well as we've had customers do that as well. So the easiest way to do it is we have the Codefresh CLI image readily available. And if you run it inside of a step, inside of a pipeline, it's automatically authenticated. And then you can just use CF create, specify the YAML file, and it automatically creates that pipeline process for you. We have people that utilize it in the same way to build things out like permissions and set up triggers and all sorts of events like that. But because the pipeline resource itself and the trigger settings and concurrency and everything else you can set up on the back end is actually declarative configuration, it's very easy to do that from a file source. And then you're saying it's kind of similar to the way GitOps does it with Argo CD. And yeah, that's absolutely the case, right? So if you have a Git trigger that's actively monitoring that repo, it's going to work exactly the same way. Obviously the one benefit of Argo CD, is that it has that continuous reconciliation, and the pipeline process, you would probably want to write some verification as well. All right.
Any final questions? We'll wrap up.
Let's see. I think
the engagement's been excellent. I mean, people have been asking quite a few questions, and I see Laurent and Luke have answered quite a few. So we really appreciate everybody asking those questions. And I saw somebody say, hey, Codefresh is awesome. I'm going to introduce this to my development team. I'm going to show it off. So I'm glad to hear that. So thank you, Brandon. Any final words?
No, I mean, this has been awesome. I hope you guys took some interesting things away from the demos. I love seeing the Terraform bootstrapping as well, because I think there are some teams that are more comfortable with that approach to spin this stuff up and kind of control it from a governance perspective. And yeah, thank you so much. And if you have questions, feel free to keep adding them to the chat. I'll be here answering. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Brandon. Well, with that, it means it's time for CI/CD Jeopardy. You can see I've got my best Pat Sajak on. We've got a couple of fantastic panelists who will be joining us for this stupendous event. If you're in the chat, play along, because I think some of these questions you're gonna find challenging. So we'd love for you to find these. And of course, don't forget to stick around for the free codes at the end, where you're gonna get some additional codes for getting GitOps certification and some other goodies. And of course, we're going to hear from some Codefresh users that have really transformed their organization by adopting these tools. We really appreciate you and love the questions in the chat. I hope these demos have shown you just how powerful and how accessible improving your software delivery is. So with that, we're going to start CI/CD Jeopardy. Mwah! First off, I want to introduce panelist Leanne Lee, coming to us from Loft, the vCluster queen. Leanne says that she always wanted to save the world. After a failed attempt at becoming a lawyer, she decided to do something with computers instead. Working as a full stack engineer, attending and speaking at tech events. During this time, she fell in love with the community, discovered her passion for building and providing a safe, productive space for all. And Leanne, you just hosted us in Amsterdam.
Yes. Hello. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. Yes, I host 10,000 people in Amsterdam, where I live.
Yes, and she hosted the fantastic Kuberoki.
Yes, Kuberoki, the first and only Kubernetes karaoke community. It's so sad you missed it, though. It was a lot of fun.
I know, I was passed out. I'm sorry. So let me introduce Cody de Arkland from Launch Darkly. Cody leads the developer relations practice at Launch Darkly, where his team focuses on developer advocacy, technical marketing, and developer experience. Darkland's background is in content creation, enterprise IT automation, infrastructure as code, and application delivery. So welcome, Cody.
Hello, hello. How are we doing?
Fantastic. Are you ready for some Jeopardy?
I am absolutely not ready for Jeopardy.
Well, then, with no further ado, let's introduce Robert. Robert is the head of community evangelism at SUSE. He has been working in technology for over 17 years. Most of that time is spent in .NET and Microsoft space. My apologies for you. He moved towards the cloud when .NET first became a first-class citizen on them and never left. From Cloud Foundry to Kubernetes, he has also led several modernization efforts and built out his last company's cloud practice. Thank you, Robert, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let me introduce the rules for CI/CD Jeopardy. First, each question has a short reading time for 3 seconds where the buzzers are disabled. You should all have your buzzers ready to go. Second, each question has a time limit of 30 seconds before it times out, and we'll get rid of it. You can buzz in at any time during that time period, even if someone is already answering the question. If you answer correctly, you get to pick the next topic and the dollar amount. And of course, you must answer in the form of a question, because this is Jeopardy. And most of all, have fun. So if you don't know the answer, I won't blame you if you want to tell us a joke. So Leanne, because you hosted us all in Amsterdam just 2 weeks ago, I want to give the board to you, and I'll introduce our categories. First, it takes a village. These are focused around open source community and development. Second, GitOps, that focuses on GitOps specific trivia. We'll do it live, focusing on issues as they head to production. Works on my machine, focuses on containerization. Git history, a bit of trivia about cloud native history. And of course, Kubernetes, that focuses on the language of the cloud native space. So Leanne, the board is yours.
Yes, I'm trying to pick the category that will embarrass me the least. So I will do, we'll do it live for 300, please.
We'll do it live for 300.
Yes.
This kubectl command lets you interactively edit resources. Nobody's buzzed in yet. Anybody's answer. Okay, we've got Leanne. Go ahead.
what is kubectl edit?
That is correct. kubectl edit does allow you to edit resources. The bane of every operator's existence and the joy of every operator who's running out of band and trying to fix something. Leanne, the board is yours.
Oh no. All right, let's do git oops for, I'm going to do 200.
Git oops for 200. These 4 principles comprise the GitOps principles, and this is the daily double. So double points for whoever can answer this question correctly. Nobody's buzzed in yet. Anybody's question? Ooh, Christian Hernandez is sitting in the chat, just face red. He's ready to answer it. Nobody wants to go for it? It's going to time out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Robert.
I think it's versioning, declarative. Okay, I'm done.
Can anybody helping out with the last 2? Okay,
No
so
friends.
Robert, we're going to give it to you, but we're only going to give you half points because you forgot pulled automatically and continuously reconciled.
Okay.
Only 4 principles to remember, but you had the declarative and version. You didn't mention immutable, but it's part of the same principle. So I think you had it. So because you got partial credit, Robert, the board is yours, and you can pick a new topic.
Oh, I'm going to go with Kubernetes for 300.
Kubernetes for 300. The etcd name comes from this. This is a pretty challenging one if you don't know the history of etcd. I see people talking about it in the chat. Could be a hint for our panelists that want to cheat. No one will stop you. Buzz in if you think you know it.
This is hard.
Okay, Cody.
What is, are we supposed to answer this as Jeopardy? We're going to pretend like we're entering as Jeopardy.
Yes.
What is the distributed file system for storing like configuration data and objects as part of a file system?
That is what etcd is. Judges? No, I'm sorry. It's not quite close enough to the answer for where the name comes from.
Oh, okay.
Anybody want to steal? Last chance? Okay, it looks...
Wait.
Leanne.
Okay, I'm going to make a joke now. What is the etc folder?
Yes, the etc folder. I'm going to give you credit for this. So
No way.
Linux, what is it's the etc folder, the etc folder is where configuration is stored in the Linux file system. The D just stands for distributed. You were very close, Cody. I'm so sorry. But Leanne, it's going to you. I saw Christian in the chat throughout that answer. So, all right. Leanne, it's your board.
Right. Let's go with Git history for, okay, let's do 500. Let's just see what's what.
Okay, Git history for 500. And here we go. This company hosted the first Argo Con. People say the music is too loud, so I've shut it off. If you missed the music, shout it in the chat. This company hosted the first Argo Con. Robert.
What is Microsoft?
That is incorrect.
Who's Red Hat?
That is partially correct, but mostly incorrect. Gonna get all the Red Hatters mad in here.
They're already mad.
Cody, it's all you.
I'm gonna take a shot here. Was it Intuit?
Also, no. So I'll give you partial credit as well. Codefresh hosted the very first Argo Con along with Intuit and Red Hat. So I will give each of you partial credit for your answers because you mentioned companies that also hosted. I think some of the Red Hatters are saying, no, Codefresh is the wrong answer. But you forgot which game you're playing. You're playing Codefresh's CI/CD Jeopardy. So that's, of course, going to be the answer. All right. So with that, since I gave Cody, you're the last one to get partial credits, your board.
Let's go. We'll do it live 200.
We'll do it live for 200. Changes to production that are not reflected in their source of truth are often called this? All right, Cody.
Is that either what is change drift?
That is correct. I was waiting for your weather, or because it sounded like you were going to say something else too. But
I was
correct.
going to, but I decided to commit to it.
That is right. Good job committing. We appreciate that. We're a big fan of that. All right, nice.
So.
All right, Cody.
Let's go. It takes a village 200.
It takes a village for 200. The GitOps working group falls under this CNCF SIG.
Oh,
Leanne.
damn, it's a SIG. Okay, I misread. I'm going to still say what I was going to say, which is, what's the tag app delivery?
That is correct. SIG app delivery. Very good. All right. Your board.
We'll do works on my machine. Oh man, I'm gonna be terrible with this. 200.
Works on my machine for 200. Docker registries and Helm repositories are examples of what standard store? Let's see, Cody.
To go an image store.
I'm sorry, that's correct.
Hmm.
Docker registries are an image store, but Helm repositories.
Fair.
Someone's chance to steal. Beep, beep. Okay, the answer is OCI, Open Container Initiative. They are OCI registries. Cody, oh wait, who picked that? I think Leanne did. So Leanne, steal your board.
Let's do Kubernetes for 400.
Kubernetes for 400. This is the actual correct way to pronounce this word. Robert.
What is kubectl?
That is correct. In fact, there is only one wrong answer, which is kubectl. That's one that I've heard, and it is terrible, and no one should say it. Kubectl, 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 all just fine. Just don't say kubectl. Robert, your board.
I'm going to say it takes a village for 300, please.
Takes a village for 300. This person was the first to demonstrate container breakout on a mainframe. This is really a test about how much you've been on Twitter. If you are chronically online, Leanne.
Who's Ian Coldwater?
That is correct. Ian Coldwater with Chad Rickenschrode in 2020 at RSA. I think this answer might be wrong.
I'm terminally online.
But it is definitely Ian Coldwater. Well done, Leanne. Leanne, your board.
We'll do it live for 400, please.
We'll do it live for 400. The difference between continuous delivery and continuous deployment is this. Cody.
Continuous deployment is the act of the continuous running or deployment of code out to a place. Delivery is the releasing of that functionality to or delivery of that functionality to end users.
That is correct, but you did not answer it in the form of a question.
I was so excited because it was one that I needed. I'm so excited.
Continuous deployment, automatically deployed, continuous delivery, deployed with human intervention. So we actually demonstrated both today by having steps that had an approval step, that would be continuous delivery, and continuous deployment where it was automatically deployed. Cody, your board.
Let's go Kubernetes for 200.
Kubernetes for 200. YAML is an acronym for this name. Robert.
What is yet another markup language?
That is correct. Great. Love those self-referential acronyms. Robert.
We will do, it takes a village for 100, please.
Takes a village for 100. This company created Argo. Ooh. Cody.
Intuit, right? What is Intuit? What is Intuit?
That is correct. Intuit, according to the Argo homepage, Intuit created Argo. We would have also accepted Applatix, which was acquired by Intuit after creating Argo. But Intuit is the canonical creator of the Argo project. Cody.
It takes a village for 400.
Takes a village for 400. These 4 companies maintained and sponsored the Argo project at graduation. I'll give partial credit. Buzz in. Okay, Leanne.
I'm going to go for the partial. Okay, who are Codefresh, Red Hat, guessing Intuit, and then Microsoft. I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to give you partial credit. You'll get 3. Can anybody name the 4th? Okay, so the 4th one was BlackRock. BlackRock was the 4th company. Yeah, the silent partner of Argo, if you will.
To be fair, the chat is giving us wrong answers. Someone was saying Acuity in there. I was like, oh.
Acuity actually didn't exist at that point. So good to know. All right. So Leanne, your board.
Let's do Git Oops for 300.
Git Oops for 300. Sorry, I clicked on the wrong one. In the past, GitOps was often confused with this process for managing configuration. Cody.
What is infrastructure as code?
That is correct. Infrastructure of code, of course, meets part of the standard for GitOps and can be used in GitOps, but it must be continuously reconciled, which is not necessarily part of infrastructure as code. It's a subset. It's a square, but it's not a rectangle. Or it's a rectangle, but not a square. You get the idea.
It's a shape, not a circle.
Yeah, you got it. All right, Cody.
Works on my machine for 300.
300. This is always the problem. Robert.
What is DNS?
That is correct. It is always the problem. Very good.
Dang, I was going to say what's layer 8. All right.
I love someone in the chat said life. All right. Back to you, Robert.
Let's do Git history for 200.
Git history for 200. This company was the first to launch commercial offerings on Argo. Leanne.
Who's Codefresh?
That is correct. Codefresh first launched commercial offerings on Argo in 2020, beating anybody else by several years. Good to know. Tell your friends. I'm sensitive about it. All right. Leanne, your board.
Let's take the big ones. Let's do, we'll do it live 500.
We'll do it live for 500. This famous video game case study was one of the first proofs for Kubernetes scalability. Robert.
What is Niantic's Pokemon Go?
That is correct. Pokemon Go. Very good. Yeah, Niantic was, of course, the parent company for the Go that released the Pokemon Go game. But that case study was very famous because they essentially went crazy viral. They had to scale up their application overnight for an audience of like 1 billion people. And it worked miraculously. Robert.
Let's do Kubernetes for 500, please.
Kubernetes for 500. The abbreviation for Kubernetes is K8, and the 8 in K8 stands for this. Robert.
The 8 characters between the K and the S.
That is correct, though you did not answer it in the form of a question. Cody's over here like, you're not getting on his case when he doesn't answer in the form of a question. Well, Cody.
I like Robert. Give him the points. Give him the points.
Sometimes I forget.
You can be partial.
Where's the no
points.
penalty for that?
I'll take partial. I'll take partial.
We'll change it in the future for the next one. It is a numeron. You count the 8 letters between the K and the S. Robert, your board.
Let's do Git history for 100, please.
Git history for 100. This technology at Google served as the spiritual progenitor for Kubernetes. Leanne.
What's Borg?
That is correct. We also would have accepted Omega, which is sort of a sibling technology that they had. Leanne, your board.
Git history for 400, please.
Git history for 400. Argo CD was originally created for this purpose. This is a specific answer. Okay, Cody.
I'm taking the shot. What is continuous delivery?
Judges? No, I'm sorry. That's not specific enough. That is what it does, though. Anyone want to steal? Okay, time is up. To manage deploying Argo workflows. When Argo was created, Argo workflows were the very first tool, and they needed to find a way to get those workflows onto the cluster, hence Argo CD. So still your board, Robert, you're the last one that was right? Yeah.
Let's do, it takes a village for 500.
It takes a village for 500. This security-focused SIG is named for a popular video game. Leanne.
What's SIG Honk?
That is correct. SIG Honk, named after the game Untitled Goose Game, which is a game where you are a terrible, terrible goose. Leanne, your board.
Get oops for, okay, I'm going to do strategic now. 100, please.
Get oops for 100. This tag should never appear in a GitOps configuration. Cody.
Latest. What is latest?
That is correct. Any floating tag would also have been accepted. Cody, your board.
Kubernetes for 100.
Kubernetes for 100. Kubernetes and most CNCF names come from this real language. Leanne.
What's Greek?
That is correct. It is a source of constant hilarity to Kostas, who is Greek and who helped create the GitOps certification, who incidentally, people are asking in the chat, where's that code? It's coming. Stay tuned. It must be interesting to have a language where people think it's the best thing to name stuff. So everything is just named in your language. All right.
I think it's also pronounced Kybernetes in Greek, right?
It's actually, we always pronounce it wrong in English because it's not actually pronounced that way in Greek. Leanne, your board.
We'll do works on my machine for 100.
Works on my machine for 100. This brand name is the Kleenex of containers. Robert.
What is Docker?
That is correct. Your board.
All right, we'll do get oops for 500, please.
Get oops for 500. In control theory, GitOps operates in this way. This is a very technical answer. Cody.
It is in a declarative way?
That is incorrect. I'm sorry. Way to take the shot, though. You miss 100% of the ones you don't take. Any other guesses?
Nicely. Oh, well, what's nicely?
Nicely. In the chat, they're saying poll method. The answer is a closed loop. Control theory is a specific, academic definition, and closed loop is part of the inspiration for how GitOps operates. So I think that the board is still yours, Leanne.
Git history for 300, please.
Git history for 300. The Argo project started with a tool that now bears this name. If you were paying attention, I actually said the answer to this question earlier.
What's Argo workflows?
That is correct. Argo workflows was the beginning of Argo, and it was renamed Argo workflows from Argo when Argo CD was created. Leanne, your board.
We'll do it live for 100.
We'll do it live for 100. Image pull backup is caused by this. It should actually say image pull back off, not backup.
Yes, that's what it is. That's why I got confused.
Cody.
The image pull back off is what is the image not being available to be pulled?
That is correct. Not being able to fetch the image. What is not being able to fetch the image? This can be caused by the image not existing, by not having an image pull secret, or by, in my case, most of the time, big fingers. All right, Cody, you're bored.
Go big. What it works on my machine for 500.
Works on my machine for, I feel like I've traumatized you with this question business form of the.
It is. I'm really messed up now.
Works on my machine for 500. This is the only CI/CD that has debugging with breakpoints. Cody.
What is Codefresh?
That is correct. We actually demoed it earlier before Jeopardy. Lots of people getting that one right. Appreciate it. All right. So Cody, still your board.
Works on my machine for 400.
Knowing where a container was built and came from means you know this. Robert.
What is its supply chain?
Judges? No, I'm sorry. We're looking for a specific term.
What is it me? Yeah.
Yeah.
What is SBOM?
Sorry, SBOMs tell you about what is in the container, but they don't necessarily tell you where it's from. Cody, last chance to steal.
What is its origin?
Close, but that is incorrect. It is in the chat. The answer is provenance. Fancy word, Provence. All right, final question from Get Oops for 400 before we go to the final Jeopardy, final factile. The GitOps working group famously considered this desktop software as a potential source of truth. This is very much an inside joke. Christian knows exactly what it is in the chat. Cody.
I'm going for humor on this. So what is Excel?
That is correct.
What?
Excel actually can function as a GitOps compliant source of truth as long as it is immutable and versioned, which you can do with Excel or even Google Sheets. You can actually use it as a source of truth. There was actually a talk at KubeCon a few years ago called Sheet Ops. Strangely, hasn't taken off yet, but where they used Google Sheets to manage the state of their clusters. Excellent answer. I love the chat is blowing up at this one. Okay, so now it is time for the final question. You all will need to enter a wager of what you're going to bet on this question. You're very close, and so it is anybody's game at this point. Think very carefully what you want to wager. Should you wager $1? Should you wager $2,000? Do you wish that you paid more attention during those Jeopardy strategy YouTube videos? Did you leave the oven on? Did you commit all of your work before you came to this meeting? All right, wagers are now in. Let's play. The question is, or the answer is, this animal serves as Argo's mascot. Give you a moment to type those in. Cody very much looks like he's Googling. Maybe looking at it.
I was making a joke for what it's worth, was not Googling, was making a joke in text.
All right. So
I can't believe you wagered everything.
Yes, everybody. Cody and Robert waged everything. Leanne waged 1,000. So Cody, because you are tied for second place, we're going to see your answer first. Your answer was, what is an octopus? I asked in the form
of a question, but you judged me too fast and said I was Googling, so I entered.
You got it correct. Excellent. Robert, you're also tied for second place. Answer octopus. That is correct. And Leanne, your answer was also octopus. Didn't get anybody tricked with this one. We thought some people might say squid because sometimes I say squid, but it is in fact an octopus. So with that challenge, congratulations. It's a tie to both Cody and Robert. Man, Leanne, you were leading the game the entire time. And you knew that last answer too. So close.
See, this is what imposter syndrome gets you, you know?
That's right.
I'd like to thank Excel for my tied victory, Robert. I'd like to thank Excel.
I'm also just going to note that Robert did not answer in the form of a question. So it's like it's a...
You know, thank you. Thank you. Can I get 100? Can I get $1?
In Jeopardy, did they always write out in a question, or do they just put a question mark at the end? I don't know. Do we have a prize? Is there a prize? I don't remember where we landed on with that.
Oh, did we?
Yes, the prize was a donation to our favorite charity.
Yes. So the winner gets to pick Codefresh will make a donation to your favorite charity. So Robert and Cody, do you already know what charity you want us to donate that money to?
I personally know. I can tell you right now. Cody?
Yeah, so a big fan of the Sacramento Children's Home in on the West Coast. So that's where my vote is.
Perfect. Now I want to go to each of you and tell people where they can follow you and what you're doing, and take a minute.
All right, I'm just going to start. Okay, cool. So yes, I do have something to plug, and I will plug it in the form of a question first, which is, would you be interested in something like code spaces, but open source and for any infrastructure? If yes, then you need to follow Loft on Twitter, LoftSH, because we have a new open source project coming up May 16. And if you're interested in what I'm doing, you can follow me on the internet at Leon Makes Things. I'll be speaking at Open Source Summit in Vancouver and at kubectl Toronto. So if you're attending any of these events, please come by and say hi. I would be so happy to talk to you. Thanks.
Absolutely. I'll be there as well. Cody.
So you can follow me on any of the social medias under my name. So Cody D. Arkland. I'm all over on those things. So follow me there. We have Launch Darkly has an event coming up in a couple of weeks. I will drop the link in the chat. I would love to see someone there, a few people there. I'm going to be doing some demoing and some speaking. Come hang out with me and learn about Launch Darkly a bit.
Excellent. Thank you. And Robert.
Yeah, you can follow me at Robert Sirc, SIRC, on any of the social media platforms. We're plugging Rancher Academy. We re-released that here at KubeCon a couple weeks ago. And on a personal note, my wife and I are going to be doing couples therapy with Codefresh. Thank you to Dan Garfield. We'll be recording that. And I take my wife through learning GitOps with Codefresh. And let's see if I stay married.
I will be tuning into that stream 100%. I am so excited for you. So that's actually the perfect intro. Let's give a last round of applause to Leanne, Cody, and Robert. Thanks for playing today. Woo! Yay!
Thanks.
Quick question,
so
Robert.
Fun.
Where's your charity, Robert?
Oh, Girls Who Code. So.
Oh, excellent. Cool. Well, we'll make sure to post about that on social media so you guys can share your donation. Sharon's all over that. All right. Thank you so much. We're going to say goodbye, and we're going to introduce our final portion of segment for the day. And of course, Robert did bring up the GitOps certification. So those codes, they're still coming. So stick around. I see from the chat, it looks like people have enjoyed the event so far. Thank you so much. We love showing you this stuff. I want to introduce a fantastic Codefresh user and customer, Victor, from Viva. Victor, welcome, and thanks for making the time to hang out with us. Did you enjoy the Jeopardy game?
Oh, that was awesome. So I might have to change a lot of my answers because now I have to switch everything to Excel, but no, thank you for having me.
So I want to jump straight in, and maybe you can introduce yourself, what Viva does, and where you started your journey of modernizing software delivery with Codefresh.
No, absolutely. So my name is Victor Kwaska. I am the Senior Director of Technology DevOps for Viva, specifically for a product called Viva Compass. So what we do is we do big data workflows, big data analysis on patient, prescriber, national data within the life science industry. And the company is relatively large. It's 7,000 plus employees, but Compass within itself is a subset. It's 60 employees, a group of about 60, and half of that is engineers and data scientists. So where we kind of started within the journey of building was a few years ago, we were able to start this Compass project. We started from scratch. Luckily, we were able to start from the very beginning. So the first thing that I wanted to do was build something that was simplistic. Think about simplicity. Think about how we would actually start building out a massive product while we were just starting off. So we started off with a team of 2 DevOps engineers, myself included, and built out what we thought was a modern workflow. We were able to get a team, about 15 developers at the time, and we had to start building quickly. So what can we do to kind of build end-to-end infrastructure, design, and get ourselves into the market very quickly? And we went end-to-end GitOps.
Yeah, fantastic. So you kind of dove in with both feet. What tools were you using before, and what were the challenges that you had with those tools that you were trying to resolve?
That's a great question. So one of the caveats that we had was when we first started the journey, we brought in a team that did not know anything about GitOps. Not many people did several years ago, 4 years ago. And the way that the developers deployed was more monolithic. So how do we move away from this monolithic type of mindset into a GitOps flow? And the simplicity kind of carried it out, because once we built out the standardization and how easy it was to kind of get through those patterns, everyone kind of bought in very quickly.
Yeah, and that modernization process, I think you mentioned that you starting on a greenfield project that was a new software project, or were you migrating a project? Was your first one?
So in this case, we were actually greenfield. So I was able to start from scratch. But on the opposite side of that, once some of the groups actually saw how beneficial and how fast we were able to kind of work through and deploy our applications, we actually went and started migrating other teams as well. So I've been on both sides of it. Greenfield, completely, we're able to start from scratch, as well as take some monolithic applications and try to convert them over to GitOps patterns as well.
Yeah, was there like, what was that dynamic like for the team that was on the legacy application? Were they seeing what you were doing with your greenfield app and saying, "Oh my gosh, that's such a better way"? Or was it just, "Hey, we just got to migrate"? What was the vibe?
So a lot of it was, we saw a lot of issues with some of the older patterns. There was a clear separation between dev and operations. There was continuous issues with the pipelines. So we have monthly meetings, and we all get together to kind of work through our workflows, and we talk through some of the benefits of the GitOps patterns and some of the benefits that Codefresh bring into the GitOps patterns. And with those, we were able to see how those issues don't really apply to us as much as they did to some of the other teams. So working through some of those patterns where we kind of cleaned up the iteration between the ops and the development flows made it very easy for people to start wanting to move to the GitOps patterns.
Yeah, this is something that we've kind of touched on a little bit, is sort of that process of modernization, and but also not getting caught up with the ideal, because sometimes teams will, I notice they'll struggle to move all the way to GitOps just because they're not organized for it, and they haven't had that mindset before. Did you have to take any intermediary steps with this, or did you were like, "Hey, we're just going to go straight to GitOps"? No manual approvals, no hit the sync button, everything auto synced, or was there a process that you went through?
So for the greenfield, when we first started the product, we went all in. So we built out. Luckily, we had the luxury of going greenfield. So, but we have hundreds of applications. We went full end-to-end GitOps, and we deploy probably 70-ish applications, 50-ish to 70 applications every 2 weeks. So we are continuously deploying. So we're able to manage not just 1 or 2 applications, but we're able to manage our entire workload continuously via the GitOps pattern. And that's continuous deployment.
Yeah. And so was that like, as far as your vision for what you wanted to accomplish, were you able to get where you wanted to go? Were there surprises? Are there areas that you're still trying to resolve?
Yeah, that's great. The one part of the vision was, like I mentioned before, simplicity. I wanted a platform, a workflow that worked not only for our operations team. We were limited at the time. We had a very small operations team. And but I also wanted to work for the development. I wanted it to be very easy, very concise, and very streamlined approach so we could continuously build microservice applications. I wanted them to, if they want to build a new application every day, it's fine. We had a pattern, we had the flexibility to do so. Some of the limitations that we saw was, how do we integrate this GitOps pattern and GitOps flows for our applications with things like our infrastructure? A lot of the things that we did was in Terraform. So we built out our core infrastructure with Terraform, but if applications needed S3 buckets, IAM roles, or any such infrastructure-based resources, do they have to learn Terraform? Do we have to build a module? Do we have to show them how to do that? Or can we build it into GitOps? So in our case, we actually integrated it full into GitOps and leveraged things like Crossplane to build out our applications and actually deploy IAM roles, S3 buckets, and the such directly with their applications in Kubernetes.
Oh, perfect. So basically, a developer can make a change. There's an automated process that can pull in whatever Crossplane, make sure that's applied, which then will reconcile this additional infrastructure, and then the changes will roll out from there. So from a developer experience, is it essentially, hey, I just work on my code, a lot of stuff happens, and I can trace it through, I can see where it goes, but I don't necessarily need to worry about that automation. And does that make your DevOps engineers popular and happy? Is that, is everybody, do you just walk through the halls and everybody just high fives you all day? Or
yeah, pretty much. That's my day. That's my day in a nutshell. No, it's great. So we also have like tons of compliances that we have to abide by, but leveraging this pattern where everything is committed and we have a single source of truth within Git, we're able to promote from development to QA to all these other environments and into production with a guarantee that we know exactly what's going into every single environment and then directly into production. So it makes it extremely streamlined. And from a compliance perspective, it's there. We know what's happening. We know where it is, what applications are where, and we know who's doing what. So it makes our life so simple.
I love this because, like, when we put out the product vision for Codefresh and we talked about the opportunity of essentially building around a container and tracing that through its life cycle and bringing it back into Git, these are the exact problems that we were trying to solve. And so for me, sitting here now, almost 7 years later, it's like pretty rad to listen to someone like you tell me, yeah, that's working. Like, it's working. And like, we're deploying more frequently. Like, we have less downtime. We're able to recover from failure more quickly. The team is happier. They're more productive. The operations team is getting what they want. It's like, it's just rad. It's really cool to hear. I think as we kind of wind down, and again, thank you so much for coming and sharing your experience. And I think we're going to have you back on to do maybe a webinar in the future. But any parting advice for people who are still, they're where you were 2 years ago. And I think it was about 2 years ago that you guys started. Any final words for those folks of advice that you'd give them?
Yeah, I think the one thing would be, don't be scared. I mean, the platform and Argo is very different than CI/CD patterns in the past. The GitOps flow makes life easy. So migrate one application at a time, see how it works, and you'll see how easy it is to start converting application after application into a new pattern. And once the team starts seeing the benefits of a GitOps workflow, it makes not only the operations life simple, but everyone. Developers become happy, QA becomes happy, management becomes happy because we're able to release very quickly.
Yeah, it's worth it. It's worth doing. Yeah,
it's definitely worth doing. And now with the Argo integrations with Codefresh, you don't have to even worry about building the Argo. I built the Argo myself. Before Argo was a thing, we had to set everything up. Now it's you push a button and you have Argo, you have all the capabilities right there. So
I love that. Thank you so much. And it's interesting, you know, what you're talking about and mentioning Argo and GitOps. One of the things that I've seen, and we'll close on this, but I see a lot of people who come to Argo for the first time and they think, I want to do, you know, I heard Argo is great. I've been doing CI/CD pipelines, and they look at the Argo project, they see it's 4 projects, and they say, oh, I guess I should use Argo workflows to deploy my software, and they'll start using it just because they aren't aware of what Argo CD is doing in the GitOps. That's why that GitOps certification is so critical, that training. And I think you've completed it. Have you had your team complete it as well?
Yeah. My team has built it, and you don't have to do the whole thing. I started several of my years just with Argo CD and worked our way to Argo workflows and all the other tooling that was there. There's a whole suite, but put your foot in and start. Perfect.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Victor, for joining us. And I hope we'll see you again soon. Okay.
Great. Thank you for having me.
All right. So with Victor signing off, we have one more guest. And then, of course, we will be closing with some codes and some call to actions. I hope everybody has been able to learn a lot today. But finally, I want you to introduce our last guest, our last special guest. Oh, sorry, I'm just getting stuff out of the way. Robert from Tigris. Tigris has been a Codefresh customer, I think, for the last 1.5 years or so. And Robert, you've been you've been a huge advocate of what you've been able to accomplish. So do you want to take a minute and introduce yourself and what Tigris Data does?
Sure. Thanks. Thanks, Dan, for having me. And hello, everyone. All those fellow Ohioans, hello there. Yes, so my name is Robert Brevis, and I'm a founding engineer here at Tigris Data. I've been around, databases since, my Percona days as a consultant. And what Tigris does is essentially it provides an open source alternative to NoSQL databases such as DynamoDB or MongoDB. So if you're an open source advocate, which I'm sure a lot of you are, please go ahead, check out the code, contribute. We'd love to see you do that. And yeah, that's basically the rudimentary description of the databases. It's a NoSQL database. We have an API, we have SDK to access it, and it has search integrated into it. So lots of things that I used to build as a consultant for several large companies in the Bay Area. We are trying to build that in a way that it's distributable and take that game next level and deduplicate some of that job.
Yeah, with that vision that you've had, one of the biggest challenges, we talked about this at the very beginning with Emily when she was on where we were talking about the challenge of organization and teams. And something like Codefresh obviously brings people together because the developers are in here, the operations people are in here. I've even seen product managers who are in there and designers who are in there because they're able to trace, where their JIRA tickets are at and changes and seeing all that stuff. How have you structured your teams so that they can take advantage of this tooling?
Well, so as a small startup organization, we have probably, I would say, we structured our team by splitting it into 2 pieces. We also think of the platform as a fundamental piece that will standardize and enable the developers. And essentially, engineering is the other big part, where in our vision for software delivery, We want to enable them. We want to nourish microservices, and we want to experiment and add on pieces to that database easily. So in that vision, we are relying on platforms such as Kubernetes, which, if you're familiar, and you all are probably pretty intimately familiar with Kubernetes at this point, it is not as widely supported for by stateful workloads these days. So it's
very tricky. Getting GitOps and stateful takes a little extra work.
It does, and there are still some steps to take in terms of standardization on the operators front and things to make it an easier platform for stateful workloads. So that's roughly the picture. We have essentially a platform team, but we are as a small startup, we all do all kinds of things, including code.
Yeah. And this actually brings me to another topic, because I think when we had talked before, you told me that you were basically in a process of modernization of moving to microservices. And so I wanted to hear, as you leveraged Codefresh to start building and deploying microservices, what were the challenges you faced with microservices, and how did Codefresh help you tackle those things?
Well, so we had two sides of the challenges we faced. One was around internal delivery, where we wanted to deliver the software to our own engineering groups and just be able to deploy different components. We wanted to easily add new features, and the way Codefresh helped us, it made that process easy to see through. It made deployments easy to do, easy to implement as a app marketplace, as a self-serve type of a platform. And we had a secondary challenge that is probably a little bit novel to us, is that we wanted to enable customers to run our stack possibly on-prem. So in order to be able to deploy our software the same exact way, with having some of these individually scalable components be part of our platform, we needed to find a platform and this was Kubernetes and also Argo CD/Codefresh that enabled us to have the same standardized environment available to us. And not to talk about the other challenge, which was, if we have hundreds and hundreds of these customers running our stack on-prem, how will we oversee it? How will we control it? And that single pane of glass has really, been a game changer for us.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, I think even going into structuring, Codefresh has the option of managing app of apps, where you can have this kind of parent application and people are self-served a directory and Git that they can control, or application sets where you can basically generate applications. And then all those things are exposed in Codefresh. And if you're just using Argo CD, the community version, they're not necessarily clear, whereas in Codefresh, it's very clear. And then as those changes are made, seeing what developers actually did, and not just, oh, it's just an image change. What does that mean? Seems like that brought you guys a ton of value.
It did, and it was, like I said, it has been a game changer for us. Just like declarative deployments, containerization was a game changer compared to where we were 20 years ago. Mutating states and not packaging things as easily. Now Codefresh and Argo CD based applications and app sets will enable you to, in a way, kind of like do a high level packaging of those application sets, like you said. And it has been a game changer and a godsend for us to be able to do that and fine-grain our control over how we do our deployments.
Any final advice for those who are listening, who are getting ready to embark on this journey? They're getting ready to modernize. What should they keep in mind?
I'd say implement it earlier than later if you can. It will help a lot with the agility, and it will enable your developers to deploy much more frequently. And then some of the major benefits are also the metrics that you will get out of it. So if you have build this deployment system, and let's say your system is going to end up being a more complex deployment, having a system like this available to you and be able to tell if a customer's deployment failed or there are any possible issues with the metrics will enable you to make conscious decisions around how will you release and how you do your deployments.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Robert. Appreciate you taking the time. And of course, we are going to have you on for a webinar to share more in depth about what you're doing. And that will be posted on the Codefresh Twitter or LinkedIn, or you're going to go always to codefresh.io/events to see what we have upcoming. Thanks again, Robert. And a round of applause in the chat for Robert. Thanks, Robert. Appreciate you.
Dan. Thanks for having me.
So as we kind of come to a close here, I want to thank you all for coming again. And of course, I do have those free codes coming. I don't want to hold you too long. But what we've really learned today has been focusing on, let's get from point A to point B. And we know that there are steps to help us modernize. And the great thing is that Codefresh is here to help you. We've got amazing tooling. Our support staff, as you've seen in the chat, they're fantastic. They know what they're doing. They're going to help you out and do what you need to do to improve your software delivery. If you haven't yet tried the Codefresh certification that we've been referencing, it's an amazing experience. You'll learn how to do canary releases, deploy at scale, create app of apps, application sets, use sync waves, everything you need, how to structure your Git repos, and you get this wonderful lab environment where you can actually interactively do everything that you want to do. So we highly recommend that. We are going to give away the codes in just a sec. So what's next? Well, you can absolutely, if you're excited about what you've seen, go and book a meeting with our experts. Our solutions architects are standing by, codefresh.io/request-a-demo. Of course, you can go to the Codefresh homepage and click request a demo, and they'll meet with you. You can share your architecture and talk about your goals, and they'll show you how you can achieve that using Codefresh. Obviously, you can try Codefresh free. This is an amazing thing. Almost everything that we showed you today, there were a few enterprise features related to SSO and RBAC and things, but everything else is provided free. You get a free hosted version of Argo CD. You can just spin it up, add a cluster, and start deploying today. Just go to codefresh.io, click sign up, and you can create that free account and start trying this stuff out. And of course, we're there to help you. If you reach out to the support team, we can help you out. Get that GitOps certification, learning.codefresh.io. It really is the best way to learn how to do software delivery. I can't shout it out enough. And if you're adopting, a lot of you are already Codefresh customers or users. If you need training for your team, send them this way because it's going to help them get onboarded much quicker and they're going to understand exactly how it works. And of course, register for the next Merging to Mains hosted by Brandon Phillips, who was so impactful with our demos earlier as our principal technologist. Sorry. You can go to hs.codefresh.io/merging-domain. And of course, I think it's on that codefresh.io/events. So with that, we will go to the codes, 100% off iHeart CI/CD. And if you don't manage to get that code, if it stops working before you're able to execute it, that Helm, will give you an extra 50% on both levels. So you can do level 1 and level 2, both GitOps fundamentals and GitOps at scale. Looks like in the chat, we already have the links posted. We would love to have your feedback on this event. If you learned something, if you felt like you want to learn about something else differently, feel free to hit us up on Twitter, hit us up on LinkedIn, feel free to throw it in the chat. Hey, here's what I want to hear about next. Here's where I want to go next. Here are the goals I'm trying to accomplish. I'll leave this code up, and of course, we'll be available online. And until next time, thank you so much. We loved having you. We appreciate you. And we look forward, we look forward to seeing you at future Codefresh events. Thanks, everybody. Take care.